Photocopy our body parts.
Hello YouTube, this is Kaido speaking. I think it's about time I actually started doing all that work that I had intended to do on art. And I think I should start it with the reason that I want to make those videos. This is probably going to be a fairly long video because it's talking about a rather broad subject, so I'll probably have to cut it into several bits. But, yeah, let's not waste much time and get right into it. Alright, so, anyone who's ever tried to be into the arts as a child probably knows these books, and others like it. This one's part of the Draw 50 franchise. The how to draw books that are marketed towards children, well, most of them are garbage. And it's this that really stood as a wall for me as a kid, because I always thought that this is what drawing was supposed to be like, and it's not. Well, it kind of is, but they don't explain anything. It's just draw along with the artist while he doesn't explain to you why you're doing things the way you're doing them. It's totally arbitrary. It has this section called To the Reader. And it's pretty boring. It basically tells you do everything he does. And it doesn't explain why you should do everything he does. At all. It doesn't talk about understructure. It doesn't talk about concept. It doesn't talk about construction. It doesn't talk about composition. It's just do what I do. And then you get this section called the parent or teacher. And it says, David can draw a jet plane better than anybody else. Such peer acclaim and encouragement generate incentive. Contemporary methods of art instruction, freedom of expression, experimentation, self-evaluation, and competence and growth provide a vigorous, fresh air approach for which we must all be grateful. New ideas need not, however, totally exclude the old. One such is the follow-me step-by-step approach. In my young learning days, this method was so common and frequent, so exclusive, that the student became nothing more than a pantographic extension of the teacher. In those days, it was excessively overworked. This does not mean that the young hand is never to be guided. Rather, specific guidance is fundamental. Step-by-step guiding that produces satisfactory results is valuable, even when the means of accomplishment are not fully understood by the student. The novice with a musical instrument is frequently taught to play simple melodies as quickly as possible, well before he learns the most elemental scratchings. At the surface of musical theory. The resultant self-satisfaction, pride, and accomplishment can be a significant means of providing motivation, and all from mimicking an instructor's do as I do. And he goes on. I agree to a certain extent, but I believe there is an inherent flaw in how he does this. These steps do not represent the way anyone would draw this picture. Okay? This makes no sense to this. Alright? I personally would not have started like this at all. Like, at all. The same with this. His starting points are arbitrary. It's like he had a finished image and then just simplified it down to some random elements, rather than simpling it down to the most obvious elements. This one is especially bad for me because this does not describe the underlying shape. It describes the underlying direction. But when we get to here, it doesn't look right at all. This page is sideways. Stupid. This one's really close, actually. This one's okay. As it goes through, this one does make some sense if you were drawing a boat that you were looking at. but I'm not looking at a boat, I'm looking at drawings. So the problem is, these are directed at kids who don't have access to the ability to just drop down by the docks and draw a picture of a boat that they see floating there. They don't know anything about how to find animals in the wilderness or how to keep quiet and downwind from them so that the animals won't notice them so they can observe and draw them. They don't have that stuff at their accessibility. Most kids want to learn cartooning techniques. They want to learn how to build things consistently without having to look at the original. And these books don't teach you that at all. Like, at all. They just teach you how to draw this plane from this angle looking like that every time. Any kid who actually wants to learn something about the arts, like genuinely wants to learn how to draw, is not going to be satisfied with that in the slightest. So the satisfactory feeling that he's talking about in his introduction doesn't even exist. Now that's the stuff directed at children, and all of it follows that same kind of mentality that Lee J. Ames holds. And I disagree with it completely. I agree that if a child is to become absorbed in the arts, they need to be able to produce something that they like, right, early on. But I also believe that they should be taught in such a way that they have control over it, so that they can do what they want with it. These are the same kind of idea, all of the following books are the same kind of idea applied to adults. Now, I didn't see any of these until I got into college. I didn't even know these existed. Now, do they do any better? Well, yes and no. This one is the most similar to the... this one is the most similar to the one directed at children. If you can see how it's all step by step, right? But as you can see, it's a lot more about writing. It talks about different art supplies. It talks about shapes and structure. It talks about these things. In brief, it's more diagrams when it comes to talking about things like that. I love this, the filth of shape. How goofy. And practice, of course. It talks about gestures and all that stuff, which is lovely. It actually talks about those things. What annoys me is that this is directed at adults, but this is exactly the kind of book that I needed when I was a freaking kid. And it wasn't directed at kids, so it wasn't in the local school library. It talks about masses, it talks about texture, it talks about all these kinds of things. Now it covers how to draw all these different kinds of things, and it describes them as shapes, as structures, as gestures, as textures, as techniques. This is what I wanted as a kid. Now, it does have problems. It does have problems. For example, this person underlining this paragraph here. I don't know who did that or why. It's a library book. The problem here is, again, that it doesn't talk about how to apply this outside of looking at an animal. It's cartooning techniques as applied to drawing things that you see. And this is what annoys me, because everyone who tries to teach art seems to believe that drawing what you see is better than creating things that you have seen or would like to see, such as with cartooning and design. And I disagree with that. This one's interesting because this one contains images that are far more accurate, that make far more sense to the way I draw stuff. There we go. This looks a hell of a lot more like something I would have drawn if I was looking at that bird than anything in those other books. This looks like something I would draw if I was looking at a bird. Let's see if we can get to that page with one hand. Where are you? Here. Ah, there we go. This is very accurate to the way an actual drawing evolves from beginning to finish if you're looking at an animal. But there's a lot of steps missing from this. It still shows it as a 3-step process, which is not the case at all. Yes, you do start by getting the general shapes, adding details, and then detailing the details. Yes, but it's far more complex than that. This is an extreme simplification. And having just a single line of text describing that is a little insufficient, I'd say. Because it's much more complicated than that. This paragraph annoys me. Experiment with the biggest piece of paper and the boldest, softest piece of chalk or crayon you can find, filling the paper with lines to get a feeling of freedom. Even if you think you have a gift for tiny, delicate line drawings with a fine pen or pencil, it is worth trying. It will act as a loosening up exercise. The results may surprise you. I don't like that paragraph. I like the implication that people should experiment at the end, yes. But I don't agree with how she's emphasizing that we should work with large paper and soft materials as a way of freeing ourselves. Throughout the rest of this, she talks about how certain media are essentially better than other media. She talks about how certain types of tools, like right here, ballpoint pens make a drawing look a bit mechanical, but they are cheap and foolproof and useful for quick notes. I can verify that this is a load of crap, this sentence right here. Ballpoint pens are not foolproof. If you can't draw, you can't draw with a ballpoint pen. And if you can draw very well with a ballpoint pen. It doesn't make it mechanical. It's capable of all the same things as a pencil. It's just you can't erase. And it's harder to smudge. Not that I'd really want to smudge it, honestly. All in all, this represents what actual drawing from sight is like best. But it's written by someone who I think has a very narrow view of what the arts are and should be. Then we come to Collins, Learn to Draw Wildlife, by Peter Partington. I don't know, I guess Collins must be like the publishing group or something? I don't know. Ooh, what a nice drawing. This one's really interesting. First off, he's got like this countryside code here. So I mean, the guy definitely cares about the subject. Definitely. And again, this is a very art-oriented type book. It talks about media. It talks about mixed media and styles and techniques and methods and practices. And how they can be applied in different ways to the same subject. And then he goes into the same 3-step process. Only this one is much more structural than the others. It's very simplified down into shapes. And yes, some artists do think that way. This one is far more accurate to the way a drawing actually feels like. To me, anyways. Because I'm not drawing shapes, I'm drawing a series of lines which get the impression of the edges of shapes. The flow of the form. That's how I feel when I draw. Not everyone feels the same way. Cartoonists are very, very structure-oriented, usually. But again, this really gives the impression of looking at an animal while you draw it, rather than constructing it from components. I like this page, though, because if I cover up this, does this look like an eye or just a random series of scribbles? But when I go to the other side, it's obviously an eye. I like that, because that's what it actually feels like to watch someone drawing these kinds of things. It starts out as like a weird series of lines, and then as detail is stacked upon it, it becomes a clarified drawing. So I mean, there's definitely good things in these books, but I don't think they really impart what people want to learn from them at all. It certainly didn't impart what I wanted to learn from them in the slightest. This one is really weird. I can't believe I found this book. This one talks about texture and technique and media only. It doesn't talk about structure, it doesn't talk about page composition, although it has some very, very lovely drawings in it. This person clearly loves the subject. Like, look at that, that's gorgeous. But it doesn't teach you crap. I do not like these books. These books pissed me off. These kinds of books pissed me off to no end when I was a kid because I didn't want to learn how to draw things I was looking at. I was always more interested in fantasy and stuff like that, right? Because I was a kid, you know? I didn't learn what I wanted to learn about drawing until I got to college and realized no one with an actual strong education in the arts is going to teach me what I wanted to learn. I had to hunt out people who knew the kind of information I was looking for and learn it from them on a personal level. That pissed me off. The kind of learning that people want and need when they're just beginning to get into the arts does not exist. It's not accessible. You have to hunt it down and find it for yourself. And I want to change that. That's why I want to make these videos. Because I've accumulated a ton of different kinds of knowledge from many, many different sources. And I'd like to put it all together in a way that's more accessible to most audiences. More useful to most audiences. Also, a lot of the videos on how to draw on YouTube are really, really lame. So, yeah. That's an introduction.